Hello everyone and welcome to the fourth episode of PeopleSoft Procure to Pay series by PeopleSoft channel. This is your host for today. My name is Samir and in today's episode we are going to discuss in detail about the requisition approval process in PeopleSoft system. In the previous episode, we discussed in detail about creating requisition using the add update requisition component in purchasing module. In today's episode, we are going to discuss in detail about approving a requisition. So we will see how does the requisition approval setup looks like. We will take a couple of examples and we will see how to approve requisitions in PeopleSoft system. We will discuss about what are the various approval actions available when working with requisitions. While doing so, we will see what are the tables impacted when we approve the requisition and what are the important flags in the requisition tables which are updated when we approve the requisition. While discussing these points, we will have a look at the approval workflow engine for requisition process because that will decide the approval criteria for given requisition. And finally, we will discuss about an important concept called as alternate approver. Alright, so with that agenda in mind for today, let's start the discussion. So let's discuss about enabling the approval setup for requisition. So let's say we want to create a new requisition through purchasing module. So we will go to purchasing, requisitions and add update requisitions. So if we click on add, right now we can see that the status is showing already as approved. This is incorrect because we were expecting the status to be open or pending approval, but this is showing it as approved. That means right now in this system, there is no approval required at the setup level for requisitions. So in order to fix this problem, we need to set up the approval required for requisitions. In order to do that, we need to go to setup financials supply chain, then business unit related, then purchasing, and then purchasing definition. So this is the BU for which we are working right now. So let's search and let's go to requisition change options. And here we have the section called as approval framework control. And here this checkbox workflow approval required is not checked. That is why the requisition is showing it as approved by default. So let's enable this checkbox so that the requisition will require approval. Let's save it and let's retry to create a requisition using purchasing module. So let's go to purchasing, requisitions, add update requisitions, the same business unit, and if we click on add, now this time it is showing it as pending for approval. That means we have enabled the approval required for requisition. So let's create a requisition. So we have created a requisition and it has a status of pending for approval. So one important point to note while dealing with requisition approval is that we can set up the approval required at header level only, or we can set up the approval required at individual line level of the requisition, or we can set up the approval for requisition at both the header level as well as line level. So these are the three different ways in which we can set up the approval setup for requisition, and depending upon the need of the business will take decision on what is the correct mode to set up the approval. One important point is, let's say a requisition has 10 lines and it has an approval setup at header level. So when we approve the requisition at header level, then all the 10 lines get approved by default. That's the header level approver. But if you want the flexibility that you need to control the approval at individual line level. For example, maybe out of 10 lines, you want to approve 7 lines and deny 3 lines. In that case, you can set up the approval at line level of the requisition. So as you can see, this requisition has a status pending and this is a header level status. Similarly, each line has their own status. So this is the line level status and it is useful when we are controlling the requisition approval at line level. Now, as per PeopleBooks, there are two methodologies to set up the approval of requisition. The first one is using the PeopleSoft workflow technology, which is an older technology for approval. And this workflow method enables you to approve the requisition at the header level. So this does not allow you to approve the requisition at line level. On the other hand, we have the second technology called as PeopleSoft Approval Framework, and this workflow method enables you to approve the requisition at header level or at line level or at both the level header and line level. So in my demo environment, we have the approval framework. Hence, we will discuss in detail about approving the requisition at header level as well as approving the requisition at individual line levels. So I have created another requisition and I have saved the requisition for approval. So if we want to check with whom the requisition is pending for approval, we can click on this view approvals link and this will tell us that the requisition requires approval from two people. First is Arthur Lee, and currently the requisition is pending for approval from Arthur Lee. So currently the requisition in his bucket. Once he approves the requisition, it will move forward and it will be pending for approval with Mary Lewis. So once both Arthur Lee and Mary Lewis provides the approval for the requisition status will be changed to approved. So let's understand the rules for how the system decides the approval of requisition. That means maybe not every requisition requires the approval, or how the system decided that this is going to be the person who will provide the approval. As we are using the approval framework in my current demo environment, we can get this information from the approval process setup. So in order to find this, let's go to Enterprise Components. Let's go to Approvals, then Approvals folder and Approval Process Setup. Here we need to provide the process ID which will be used by the approval framework. In our case, the process ID will be requisition. So let's search, and here we may have multiple rows for this process ID. So we need to pick up the rows which is having the maximum effective date and effective status as active, and it should match the definition ID for our transaction. In this case, we will take this particular row. So this is the concept of approval framework. It is a very important concept. At the same time, it is a big concept. So we won't go in detail about approval framework, but we will just see it from a very high level perspective for our requisition approvals. So approval framework process has multiple concepts like the stages and the paths and the steps. To keep things simple, I have taken only one stage and only one path, but I have taken 3 different steps. So as you can see, we have only one stage and one path. but we are having two steps here. Each step will have one or more approver. So what happens is we are having three steps, and each step has their own criteria based upon which the requisition will go for approval. The first important point is, as you can see, the level says header. So right now we are controlling the approval at header level only, and we are not taking the approval at individual line level. That is first point to note. Now here we can see we have three steps. The first is it should go to approval for supervisor, and then the manager and the vice president. But we are seeing only two people here, supervisor and manager. So why we are not seeing the third person here as vice president as per the setup? This is because each of these steps has their own criteria, and only when the certain criteria meets, only then it is taken into consideration for approval. If the criteria for vice president approval does not meet, then the requisition will not require approval from vice president. Let's take one example. So if we check the criteria for the supervisor, which is nothing but Arthur Lee in this case, then it says that whenever the fiscal approval amount is greater than $500 for the line level, as you can see, we have given the amount record as the PS REQ line. So we are checking that if a given line amount is greater than or equal to $500, then it will require approval from Arthur Lee. In our case, as we can see, both the lines have amount greater than 500. So it enables us to trigger the approval from Arthur Lee. So that is the first level. Now, if we check the second step, which is manager, and if we check the criteria, so the criteria here is that the fiscal approval should be greater than 1000. We have mentioned this here, so we are checking at the requisition line level, and we have given the criteria that when the merchandise amount is greater than or equal to $1000, then it will require approval from the second step, which is manager. And that's why we are having Mary Levis as the second person for providing the approval. Now, if we check the third step, which is vice president, and if we check its criteria, then here, as it's a demo environment, we have given a very vague criteria which will say requires the approval at a very high price. Since our requisition has not reached this price, that is why we do not require the approval from the third step here, that is vice president, and that is why we need approval only from two steps, that is Arthur Lee and Mary Levis. So we will stop here from approval framework because, as we saw, it is a vast concept to discuss. But just to give you an understanding, if you want to understand what are the rules for approving a requisition in your organization, then you can definitely check this approval process framework here. Alright, so this is about the rules for approval processes. And now let's go back to a requisition and see how we can approve the requisition. So I have created another requisition, which is requisition 249, and it is pending for approval from Arthur Lee. So let's log in from Arthur Lee's account and provide the first approval. So we have logged in with Arthur Lee's account. Now there are different ways to provide approval for requisition. So if you are using the fluid version of PeopleSoft, then you can click on this nav bar and we have this approvals option here. So once you click on the approvals option, it shows all the types of transactions which are pending for your approval. In our case, we will go for requisition, and if we scroll down, this is the requisition 249 which is pending for our approval. So if we want to check this requisition, we can click on this requisition and it will show us the requisition details. So before we approve the requisition, let's see in the database that we have the approval flags present in the requisition tables. For example, in the requisition header table, if we check, then we have the flag called as REQ_status. It has a value of P. That means the requisition is pending for approval. At the line level, we have the flag called as CURR_status, also called as current status. And if we check this flag, we can see we have two lines and both the lines are pending for approval. So let's go back to Arthur Lee's account. So as we saw in the approval framework, right now we have configured the approval required at header level only. As you can see, it says header is pending for your approval. So let's provide the approval at the header level. So let's click on approve and let's provide the approval comments. Alright, so we have approved the requisition and this requisition is no longer in the Arthur Lee's approval queue. So let's go back to VP1's account and let's try to reopen this requisition. So let's clear everything and let's see the business unit and the requisition ID. So let's click on view approvals and this time we can see that Arthur Lee, which is the first approval, has approved the requisition. If we want to check the comments provided by Arthur Lee, we can click on this comments and here are the required comments. Now the requisition will go into the bucket of second approver, which is Mary Lewis. So let's log in with Mary Lewis account and provide the approval. So Mary Lewis has the user ID of SVP1. So now let's see another way to provide approval for requisition. So earlier we approved the requisition using this approvals option. This time we will go to purchasing, requisition and manage requisition approvals. So this page shows only those requisition which requires your approval. For example, there are, let's say, 100 requisitions which are pending for approval, but only 20 requisitions requires approval from Mary Lewis accounts. So here, as we have logged in with Mary Lewis account, it will show only those 20 requisitions. Alright, so let's click on search and this is the requisition 249 which we are looking for. So if we want to check the requisition, let's click on this requisition. And similarly, as we are controlling the requisition at header level, it says header is pending for your approval. So we can review the requisition and then we can provide the approval. Let's give some approver comments. Let's say approver 2 approved. And let's submit the requisition. Now let's go back to VP1 and let's reload this requisition into the component. So let's clear everything and let's search for the requisition ID. And now if we click on view approval, we can see that we have received the approval from all the required approvers, as well as the status has been changed to approve. We can see the status has been changed to approve at the header level as well as line level. So this is how we can provide approval to a requisition. Similarly, if we check into database at the header level, if we run the query, the requisition status flag, which was P previously, is now changed to A for approved. Similarly, in the requisition line level, the flags are changed from P to A. Now, let's see an example of approving the requisition at individual line levels. So, I have created this requisition with two items, and it has a header status of pending as well as line status of pending. So, if I click on the view approvals, I can see the approval now is treated as per the line level. So I can see this similar path for line 1 and I can see another path for line 2. Now, how can we set up the approval for line level? It's using the approval process setter. So the only difference here is, if you remember, in the earlier process definition, the level was header, but for testing purpose, I have created another process definition and I changed the level at line. So now each line, as you can see, will follow the approval steps as we have configured here. So let's see how we can provide the approval at line level. So let's log in with Arthur Lee's account and provide the approval for line 1. So this is the Arthur Lee's account. Let's use the navigator and let's go to the approvals option. So let's select the transaction as requisition, and if we scroll down, this is our required requisition number 250. This time, as you can see, instead of header, it says 2 lines are pending for your approval. So let's say we want to approve line 1. So we will select line 1 and let's approve line 1. We will call it approver 1 approved. Alright. So let's check using the requester's account if the requisition status has been updated. So we will reload the component with our required requisition. So let me clear everything and let's reopen the requisition. So if we click on the view approvals, we can see line 1 is approved by Arthur Lee, and here are the comments given by Arthur Lee. So let's provide the approval using Mary Lewis accounts. So this is the Mary Lewis account. Similarly, let's go to approvals. Let's select it as requisition, and this is the requisition number 250. And now, as you can see, we are having only one line and we cannot see the second line. Why this happen is because the transaction will come into Mary Lewis bucket only when the previous approver has approved the requisition. In this case, only line 1 has been approved by Arthur Lee. That is why it is available for Mary Lewis. And as you can see, line 2 is not approved by Arthur Lee, and this is why it is not showing in the Mary Lewis bucket. So this is how the approval routing works. You can see the requisition in your bucket only when it is approved by the previous approver. Alright, so let's provide the approval for line 1 and let's give some comment. You can say approver to approved. Let's click on approved. Same comments coming here. Let's submit. And now it has been cleared from Mary Lewis bucket. So let's reopen this requisition into the requester's account to see changes on the. So let's click on view approvals, and as you can see, line 1 status is approved. We have received approval from all the approvals. These are the comments, and line 2 is still pending for approval. Now, an important point is that if you see the status at header level, it says C lines. It does not show the approved or it does not show pending. Why? Because there are different statuses present in the line level. If all the lines are approved, then the header can say approved, or if all the lines are denied, then the header can say denied status. But if there are multiple statuses which are present here, in this case the header status will be C lines. As you can see, line 1 is approved and line 2 is pending for approval. So if we check these information into database tables for our requisition, this is the header level. So let's query the requisition header table, and you can see the requisition status as LA, which means you have to see the lines and check the status as at individual lines because there are multiple statuses present. And if you check in the requisition line table, as expected, the first line is approved and the second line is pending for approval. So let's talk about the various types of approval actions which an approver can take on the requisition. So the first action is approve, and we have already seen a couple of examples of how the approver approves the requisition to proceed it further. The second type of action an approver can take on the requisition is denying the requisition. So let's say the approver is not happy with the requisition, he can deny it, or he wants that some changes should be made by the requester on the requisition. In that case, he can opt for denying a requisition. So let's see an example of denying a requisition. So I have created another requisition, which is requisition 251, and I have changed the requisition approval setup, and now we are controlling the requisition approval at header level. So this is the requisition, and as we can see, it is pending for approval from Arthur Lee. So this is the Arthur Lee's PeopleSoft account. Let's go to approvals. Let's go to requisitions, and this is the requisition 251. Now let's say that Arthur Lee reviews this requisition, but he is not happy with the quantity because maybe the budget does not allow, or we really do not need 100 quantities, and let's say he requires the requester to reduce the quantity from 100 to 80. In that case, he can opt for denying the requisition. So let's deny the requisition and provide the valid comments. So we provided the comment and let's submit. And the requisition has been denied by Arthur Lee. So let's reload this requisition and let's check the status. Let's clear everything and let's provide the business unit and requisition ID. So as we can see, the status is denied at the header level. We are controlling the requisition approval for this requisition at the header level, and as it is denied at header level, all the lines have status as denied. So let's see the approvals, and as we can see, it has been denied by Arthur Lee. So one important thing to notice is, since this has been denied by the first approval itself, the requisition will not route to the next approval, which is Mary Lewis, and hence you can see the workflow has been terminated. So if the requester wants to see the justification for denying, he can check the comments, and here we can see the quantity needs to be reduced from 100 to 80. And let's say the requester makes correction to this requisition and he reduces the quantity from 100 to 80. So let's reduce the quantity and let's save the requisition. In that case, as you can see, the status is pending. So what happens is, as per setup, anytime you make changes to the requisition, it will again reroute for the approval. So for any change on the requisition, you will require the approvals even though the requisition was approved previously. Okay, so let's click on view approvals. And as you can see, since we have made the changes and saved the requisition, it has again triggered an approval. So let's provide the approval using the Arthur Lee's account for requisition 251. So this is the Arthur Lee's account. Let's use the navigator and let's click on the approvals. Let's select the requisition, and this is requisition 251. So as we can see, the quantities have been reduced from 100 to 80. So let's approve the requisition this time. Let's say approver 1 approves. And as we can see, the requisition has been approved successfully by approver 1. The next type of approval action is hold action. So let's say the requisition has routed to a particular approver, but that approver requires some information or some confirmation from someone in the team, or he requires some confirmation from the requester himself. In that case, instead of denying the requisition, he can put the requisition on hold, and then once he has the required information, he can continue to approve the requisition. So let's see one example of how to put a hold on the requisition. So this is the requisition 251. It has been approved by Arthur Lee, and currently it is pending for approval from Mary Lewis. So this is the PeopleSoft account for Mary Lewis. So let's go to the approvals option. Let's select requisition and let's check the 251 requisition. So let's say Mary Lewis wants some confirmation from the requester. So he can go to more and he can select the hold option. And he can provide the required information here, and he can request for the required information or confirmation here. Alright, so let's click on submit, and now the requisition has been put on a hold status by approver 2. So let's reopen the requisition, and now we can see the requisition status is still pending. But if we go to view approvals, we can see the requisition has been put on hold by Mary Lewis, and there is some information request here from Kenneth. Kenneth is nothing but the requester here. So we can check the comments, and we can see the comments requested by Mary Lewis, and Mary has requested to confirm that is the material manager informed about this requisition. So let's say material manager is informed. So let's add the comments at the requisition header level. Alright, so let's click on OK and let's click on save. Now, as we can see, if we go to the view approvals, the requisition has been put on hold by Mary Lewis. So let's come here again. This is the Mary Lewis account, and let's go to approvals. Let's select requisition, and this is our required requisition. So if we check the header comments, we can see the comments which are provided by the requester. Since this comment fulfilled the requirement requested by Mary Lewis, we can approve the requisition and we can provide some valid justification, and the requisition has been approved. So if we reload the component for requisition 251, we can see the requisition status is approved at header level and for all the line levels. And if we check the approvals, we can see the requisition has been approved successfully. And the last action available for the requisition approver is called as pushback action. So let's understand what is pushback and how to perform a pushback. So we have this requisition number 252. We can see the requisition has already been approved by Arthur Lee and it is pending for approval from Mary Lewis. Now, Mary Lewis is not the first approver in this approval chain, and some other approver has already approved the requisition prior to Mary Lewis. Now, let's say we have a requirement that Mary Lewis wants the previous approver, that is Arthur Lee, to reconsider the approval decision. Right now, the requisition is in Mary Lewis bucket for approval, but if Mary wants to put this requisition into the previous approver's bucket, in that case, Mary can opt for an option called as pushback. Pushback means you are pushing the requisition back into the bucket of previous approver because you think that the previous approver should reconsider the approval decision. So this can be done by pushback operation. So let's see one example of how to perform the pushback. As the requisition is in the bucket of Mary Lewis, let's log in with Mary Lewis account. So this is the Mary Lewis account. Let's go to approvals. So let's select requisition, and this is the requisition number 252. Now, Mary Lewis wants to push the requisition back to the previous approver, which is Arthur Lee. In that case, we can select more option and we can say pushback. And here we can perform some valid justification because the previous approver will need to know why the requisition again came back to him for approval. So let's say we provide this justification and we submit the pushback. Now let's reload the component for requisition 252. So if we check the view approvals, we can see the requisition has been pushed back for approval to the previous approver. In that case, it is Arthur Lee. And if we want to check the comments, then we can see these are the comments. So this is the comment when Arthur Lee provided the approval, and this is the latest comment using which Mary Lewis, the second approver, has pushed the requisition back to Arthur Lee. So let's say Arthur Lee checks this requisition. So this is the Arthur Lee's PeopleSoft account. So let's go to approvals. Let's select requisition, and we can see this requisition 252 has been pushed back by Mary Lewis. So we can check it and we can see the approval chain if required. And here we will be able to see the approval justification or the approval comments which was given by Mary Lewis while pushing this requisition back to first approver. So let's say that everything is fine and material manager is already aware about this requisition. Hence, Arthur Lee can reapprove the requisition after confirming from material manager. So let's click on approve and let's select yes. Material manager has already been informed about receiving. So let's submit. So Arthur Lee has provided the approval. Now let's reload the component to check the status of this requisition. So if we check view approvals, we can see again it has been approved by Arthur Lee. So let's go back to Mary Lewis account. Let's hit refresh. Let's select requisition, and then again we have requisition 252 into Mary Lewis bucket. This time if we check the approval comments in the approval chain, he would be able to see the justification provided by the first approver. In that case, since everything is valid, Mary can go ahead and approve the requisition. The requisition has been approved. So let's check this requisition again. So we can see the status is approved at header level and for all the line levels. And if we check the view approvals, we can see we have received all the required approvals, and these are the comments. So this is about the 4 types of approval actions which an approver can perform on the requisition. Now let's discuss about another important concept called as alternate approver. So we saw that Arthur Lee is an active approver, and in day-to-day life he approves multiple requisitions. But let's say Arthur needs to go on a vacation for 1 week. In that case, what will happen is all the requisition which will route to Arthur Lee during that week will not get the approval because Arthur is out of office. So that may create delay in performing the transactions. So how to solve this problem? Well, what we can do is at the profile level, we can set up an alternate approver for Arthur Lee for a mentioned period. In that case, for the particular period, if any requisition comes to Arthur Lee for approval, even he is not there, the alternate approver can provide the required approval. This will save the organization from any kind of delay in approving the requisition due to unavailability of the approval. So let's see one example of how we can set up alternate approver for Arthur. So let's go to People Tools, Security, User Profiles, and User Profiles. So let's select the user ID as Arthur Lee, and let's go to Workflow tab. So in the Workflow tab, we have the options to set up the alternate user ID for a specified period of time. So let's say the alternate approver for Arthur Lee will be Arthur Lee _ alternate. I have created this ID for demo purpose, and let's say this person will act as an alternate approver for the period 8th of September to 15th of September. So let's save the changes. Now we are trying to create a new requisition using VP1 as a requester. So let's submit the requisition. The requisition has been submitted and it is pending for approval. So if we check the view approvals, this time in the pending section at the first step, instead of seeing Arthur Lee's name, we are seeing multiple approvers. So if we check here, we will see 2 people. The first one is Arthur Lee and second one is Arthur Lee _ alternate. Why? Because this is the period during which we have set up an alternate approver for Arthur Lee. So if any one of these 2 approves the requisition, it will go further for approver from Mary Lewis. So let's say Arthur Lee is on vacation. So in that case, let's provide the approval using Arthur Lee _ alternate. So let's open PeopleSoft into new tab. Let's log in with Arthur Lee alternate account. Let's go to Navigator and let's select the approvals option. Let's select requisition, and this is the requisition number 253 that we have created, and it is having multiple approvers. So let's select this requisition and let's provide the approver. The requisition has been approved successfully by Arthur Lee alternate. So if we reload the component for this requisition, And if we check the view approvals, then we can see the requisition has been approved by Arthur Lee underscore alternate. And these are the comments. Now, similarly, as we have seen, the requisition is currently in the bucket of Mary Lewis, and if Mary provides the approval, the requisition will have a final status of approved. So this is how the alternate approver works in PeopleSoft. Alright guys, that's it for today's episode, and I hope that this episode was helpful to you to understand the requisition approvals in detail. So we will take a pause here, and in the next episode we will discuss about requisition sourcing in PeopleSoft. See you in the next episode. Thank you.